Welcome along to 98 Not Out. If you are listening on the podcast, make sure you are subscribed. It doesn't cost anything. And tell your friends, spread the word. We want to get to as many people as possible because the content is so good. Today, we're talking to Don Topley, who's going to give us his diary of the India World Cup. Welcome along. Now, if you've read all the headlines, you'll have seen the big news that Topley has returned early from India. No, not Reece, Don. He's back. He's given up the 40-degree heat to come back to wind, rain, floods and autumn leaves. Welcome home, Mr. Topley. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you, Darren. Nice to join you, but I kind of wish it was better circumstances. You're right, I did come home slightly early.
That's right. Let's talk about India. You've for those that don't follow Don on social media, and I strongly suggest you do on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. He's been giving a very vivid and colourful account of his time spent in India following the games at the World Cup. The one thing you can't convey through any kind of media, though, Don, is the physicality of visiting India. It really is an onslaught to the senses, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been very honoured over a good number of years that I've taken tours abroad, and I really am a Tommy tourist. I love scratching the surface, talking to taxi drivers. There's the best knowledge in town. It's great. It's a great opportunity in every state and every ground and every city I visited in my trip following England, and in particular Reece in the World Cup in India. Well, it was fantastically interesting. And, I don't miss a red bus. I just enjoy traveling around, scratching the surface, going out of my way, getting up early and going sampling the local day as the best I could describe it.
Did you ever play out there in your playing days?
No, I didn't. The nearest I got was Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is incredibly different to India.
Yeah.
India really is a very hard place to tour. And you're probably thinking, what do you mean hard? Well, of course, there's the temperatures, there's the uncomfortableness, there's humidity. The surfaces are very different. I mean, before we get onto the cricket, let's be brutally honest. We've never done very well touring India, be it red ball, white ball, or any other coloured ball. It's a very hard place to tour regarding the cricket, regarding the food sometimes, regarding the atmosphere, regarding the pollution. I mean, Delhi, a friend of mine, a friend of ours, George DeBell, good friend, he had an app on his phone and it gave you the pollution level. Maybe in Suffolk here, we might be suffering about 2, doesn't really register. Maybe in London with the carbon monoxide and things like that, it might be 25. But George on his app had, both in Delhi and in Mumbai, honestly, the maximum it goes to is 500, the air quality.
Good God.
And it goes a maximum on his app, and it said 500. When it says over 400, it suggests it's extremely dangerous. It was a little bit similar in Mumbai, but locally they have a sort of, not a standing joke, but they have an off-the-cuff comment that in Delhi, if you spend a day in Delhi, and don't forget 2 teams recently, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, cancelled training because of the air quality.
That's right.
Some suggest being in Delhi is like smoking 80 cigarettes a day. Meanwhile, Mumbai is not so bad. It's only 50.
We need to send Sadiq Khan out there to impose a ULEZ zone.
Yeah, well, I mean, there will be some who say is it right that cricketers have to play in those conditions? Is it
Exactly.
health and safety, risk assessment, and things like that? But listen, that's one small area. The food, the travel. I mean, traveling around in India, basically everybody hoots, whether you're a tuk-tuk, an Uber, a lorry, a bus, or even really, dare I say it, a rickshaw. Basically, the hooting is telling you you're coming through. And if you're bigger, don't get in the way.
Someone was telling me that they were visiting India for the World Cup for the first time in a long time, and were mightily impressed at how the trains have improved. I think we've all got visions of Indian trains with packed to the rafters and people sat on the roof and everything, but no longer the case. Air-conditioned, sleek, high-speed units tearing across the country.
Yeah, there's been a lot of investment. I certainly sense from the Prime Minister Modi, not just a cricket ground, but I think in some cities the buses are going green or electric. But there's an abundance of labour. We obviously know why by the sheer population, but there's still a fair bit of litter around, which is always sad to see. Yeah. But it's a great place to tour, and every state and every city is very, very different in its own individual way.
Now, I saw you post quite a few mouth-watering pictures of local cuisine. Any particular favourites that you came across?
I love breakfast. I often had an Indian breakfast. It could be a masala dosa. It could be a paratha with some curd, which is common up in the northern part of India. The breads are just absolutely fantastic. They traditionally, I think it's right in saying they don't use much yeast, because in India, you don't need to save bread or enjoy a longer duration for the bread to be available. Basically, in India, they cook bread to immediately eat. So there's no yeast. So it does taste rather different. And I really enjoyed the breads. Probably spent more time eating vegetable curries. I do. They have a lot of meat on the bone. The meat probably isn't quite similar to this country. But when you get to Lucknow, where England played India, we went up there for 3 or 4 days. Let me tell you, that is famous for its meat. And things like the lamb kebabs, chicken, tandoori chicken were unbelievably good. So I often stayed with vegetable curries everywhere and bread. But in Lucknow, you've got to have the lamb kebabs. They were to die for.
You know what Lucknow's also famous for? It's the birthplace of Cliff Richard.
Yes, I did read that, and one of the other journalists mentioned that. Yeah, absolutely. Lucknow the game against India was played at the Ekana Stadium. And if I said that's Lucknow, it's actually probably 20, 30 Ks outside of Lucknow. And it's a brand new city, Ekana. And you could envisage that being a little bit like Dubai in a few years' time, with a fantastic stadium and the atmosphere actually at that stadium when there were 55,000 inside that brand new stadium. It was unbelievable. I'd have given my right arm to play in a game like that. For some people, it turns you on. And for some other people, perhaps they get a little scared when you play in such a gladiatorial atmosphere that was the Ekana Stadium against India.
So the tournament got underway. There was a lot of noise over here about the sparse attendances. Yeah. What was your experience of that?
Yeah, well, the first game, I flew to Abu Dhabi and then on to Ahmedabad. But sadly for me, I lost my case for a few days. So
the red case.
That red case has served me well for nigh on 30 years, I suppose. There was once a pair, but Julia lost hers and I've kept mine. And it kept going, but sadly, it not only disappeared for a couple of days, it broke. So I had to buy a new one. But it was Ahmedabad has improved. I think England played test matches there back in about 2002, maybe 2011, and it probably wasn't a very nice town at the time, but a lot of investments taken place, house rebuilding, metros and things like that, better railways, better public facilities. It's a nice big city today. And of course, for some who don't know, it's a dry state. Gujarati, which celebrates Mahatma Gandhi, is a dry state. So there's no alcohol. And in fact, you get all your bags checked and x-rayed as you enter not just the airport, but also every hotel you visit. So there's no alcohol around. And I think, we by day 5, we could have done with a beer, especially after the game against New Zealand, which was a very sad game. I think we got a lot of things wrong. We got the team wrong, and we didn't bowl very well. We didn't bat very well. And we looked rather timid. We looked a little bit like rabbits in the headlights. Maybe we were nervous about playing that very first game. But unfortunately, it almost set a precedent as we played poorly perpetually.
Yeah, tournament cricket is all about that. If you get the devil inside your head or the monkey on your back, I'll use as many comparisons as you want, but it's all about mindset. I mean, if you get on a winning streak, it's unbreakable, as we're seeing with India. But I think with England, there's a lot of criticism here, very heavy criticism in the press about England's performance, and was it preparation? Was it team selection? Is this side too old? Do you think from what you've seen, and obviously you're quite close to the squad and in the run up to it, were there mistakes that were made, or is it just a case of India's a tough place to go?
Well, certainly India's a tough place to go and play. And our history and our results over the years, it's not great. So, listen, we were world champions, and we are world champions still, actually, double world champions. But we're going to relinquish this crown. But it's a hard place to tour, firstly, and then it's a perfect storm, because we had a lot of inconvenience and we had a lot of poor decisions and difficult decisions in the lead up to the tour, the World Cup. There was the Roy factor. Was it Brooke? Should a half-fit Stokes go? And then you've got to understand form came into it. Confidence as well. That's a vicious circle. Lack of form, lack of confidence, lack of form, vicious circle. And then, to be honest, perhaps a few players, this for them was a tour too far. Perhaps one or two have got a little old, and that has shown. One or two weren't fit. That's become apparent. And then the form, it's been a perfect storm. And some difficult or wrong decisions at the toss. And I think Jos Buttler's held his hand up. And it's been a difficult tour for him. He's been not just out of form, but made some decisions. The one thing I will say, and I have sympathy for Mott, because I think in these days and times of modern day cricket, we don't have too many Churchillian type old coaches that thump tables and look you in the eye and prod you and say, you were crap today. And I think coaches and coaching today is very different. And maybe the player does have a significant power, and they like coaches to be your best friend. I'm not always sure that that's correct. I really don't lay the full blame at all at Mott, and I think you'll find the players do, and I think the players must take full responsibility. I think they've let their coaches and perhaps a few teammates down as well.
And a lot of travelling supporters as well.
Absolutely.
You yourself have experience of coaching at a World Cup, the Zimbabwe team in 1992, a generation ago in terms of cricketing and venues and all the rest of it. And of course, Zimbabwe was right at the fore in 2003 when Nas Hussein found himself caught between a rock and a hard place. What was it like for you back in those days, being involved at that level?
I was very lucky. It was quite a talented bunch of lads, probably lacked discipline on the park. That was probably the area that I tried to change. 50 over cricket is a long game. And I took them to the Australasia World Cup. That was Zimbabwe. And of course, Zimbabwe beat England. That's probably going to be a Christmas quiz question, you know. Which Englishmen have beaten England over the years? It'll be me. Silverwood, don't forget, he did very well for Sri Lanka just recently.
Yes, he did.
And it's to be Jonathan Trott. There we are. There's a quiz question, won't it? Won't it be that?
Yeah.
But it was a great honour. And Jonathan Trott's done well. Chris Silverwood has done quite well. But we found a few games that have been where teams have been victors and thumped sides. And I think that is, in essence, for me, that the modern day cricketer is still excited by T20 and teams go hard, harder, or even harder. So we've seen quite a number of fixtures where teams have been bowled out in 30 overs or 35 overs, and there's been some horrendous, huge defeats. And I think, you know, that is part and parcel of today's cricket for me. People have forgotten how to bat 50 overs. But as I go back, I think you mentioned it, there were some poor decisions at tosses. You know, old-fashioned values are still important. And one of those old-fashioned values in cricket is in countries like India and indeed Sri Lanka. Hey, if you get first use of the wicket, normally it's pretty good. And if you bat well and get 300 and watch the opposition wilt and die in the field, hey, that's not a bad tactic. I think, for me, modern day cricket is becoming overcomplicated. And I think with these matchups and these kind of things, look, I'd rather, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but I'd go back to a couple of the, what I call the old tried and trusted sort of tactics of yesteryear. Let's go and get a big score, watch them wilt and die in the field, and let's see them chase scoreboard pressure.
Every time the England side struggles, and we had this, let's wind the clock back nearly 2 years to that drubbing down under Joe Root's England, followed up by a miserable series in the West Indies, where somebody was skipping about on a rock and stubbed their toe. But at that time, you can tell us about that in a second. But every time England struggle, whatever the format, all guns get trained on domestic cricket, the county setup. Yeah. And in this case, the 100. And because we haven't done well at 50 over cricket, there's been a lot of people saying, well, that's what happens if you relegate the Royal London Cup to a second 11 development side competition. You don't really prioritise it. You push the 100 front and centre at the height of the summer. I don't really want to get into a debate about the 100, but yeah. I don't necessarily think, and I'd be keen to hear your views on this, that county cricket should be taking the blame for any of this.
I can see why you, in this chat we're having, or other people would want to bring the 100 into it and domestic cricket. Too simplistic for me, far too simplistic. We could have done with a bit more practice in India conditions. If you remember, the squad arrived in Guwahati, which is toward Assam. That's near towards Bangladesh, and they played 2 practice games and both were affected by rain. Or one didn't happen and the other one got affected by rain. And prior to that, we were playing New Zealand in a 4-match, was it ODI series? And then they relegated the Island series to a England second 11. We probably, not forgetting the history of certain bilateral series has been catch up through COVID, and that caused a few issues. South African players, the Indian players don't play domestic 50 over.
No, good point.
Sorry, they don't. So the argument about the 100 probably has somebody's agenda behind it, first and foremost. Secondly, it's too simplistic. That's not necessarily the case. We could have done without the ODI series against Ireland, clearly. We could have probably had the New Zealand series out in and play in India. That would have been quite good. I think they went off to Bangladesh to play. So I think we were short of a bit of practice in Indian conditions, especially when one was rained off against India and the other game against Bangladesh was reduced to a much less game. Almost, I think it was just above 20 overs. But so I'm probably going to say it's too simplistic with that argument about the 100. And honestly, I think we needed more practice in India. That might have done us a bit of good. But after an English season, some of our chaps with the Ashes, and obviously there was a degree of the 100 and T20s and whatever, some of our lads were dead on their feet as well. One particular lad, I think Sam Curran was tired, was extremely tired from the season.
Yeah,
these boys do play a lot of cricket, actually.
He did feature a lot. I think it's a good point about preparation, because if you're going to go and play a World Cup in India, playing an ODI series against New Zealand in the back end of September in England is not really acclimatising yourself, is it?
And probably, without stating the obvious, that's to do with money, because quite a number of the games that were sold out at Cardiff, Southampton, Oval, Lords. So, there's the agenda of money, making money playing ODIs in your own home country. That can't be forgotten as well. The money is important, as we've seen with the amount of money now being spent elsewhere following the ICC report with women's cricket, levelling up. Money is tight. We can say it's a wash. I'm afraid I don't think it is a wash. I think it's tight, and there still is money to spend elsewhere.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of money concentrated in certain areas, with a lot of other stuff just being sidelined or ignored or whatever. And there's the story this week about the Saudis investing $5 billion in the IPL, which I think is a very telling story.
Well, I was very lucky on tour for my 4 or 5 weeks, however long I was away. I'm very lucky. I know much of the squad. I know some of the administrators in this country and others. And I know many of the journalists who I thoroughly enjoy their company. I mean, when the group of journalists that, the national journalists, it's just great listening to them. I could spend hours just listening into their conversations. Very intelligent lasses, very intelligent. And I, way above my own station, I just enjoy listening to them. But some suggest that the Saudis will get involved. The Saudis are not about filling stadiums, perhaps because they don't need to, because this is their hobby. They have the money. They can afford to put on events, be it boxing recently, with Fury, football these days. Not they don't fill stadiums with punters, but it's they have the money to be able to do it. Some suggest that the Saudis will perhaps go into bed with the IPL. Others, in fact, suggest they will have a conflict. It could end up in tears. They may do their own thing, but if they do their own thing, they will want all the top Indian players. And if the Indian players start walking away from the IPL, that could present a problem for the BCCI. So watch this space. I think that story will run, and I think it will meander different ways. And it will be interesting to see whether the BCCI get into bed with them, or it's something different and challenging to the BCCI's IPL.
Going back to England, and I think we all accept that the England white ball team, 50 over team, whatever you want to call it, has come to the end of a cycle. As you said earlier on, there are certain players that it might have been a tour too far. We've got a white ball tour to the Caribbean coming up. I say the Caribbean, but England tours don't really go to the Caribbean these days. They go to Antigua, St. Lucia and Barbados because that's where British Airways fly. Nothing to do with money at all. But we've got that this side of Christmas. And then after Christmas, it's back to India for a full tour. And then there's a T20 World Cup next summer, which I think is going to disrupt our season. But
it will.
I'm just curious to see what you think about, are we going to see a brand new England? Are we going to see a brand new squad? Will there be a lot of changes on these various expeditions?
I think the selection meeting is about the 9th or 10th of November. And obviously we will have had the lads will be about to come home, I think, about that time. I think they come home about 13th, 14th. Now they're out of it. The ODI series, which is the first 3 matches, 2 in Antigua, 1 in Barbados, I expect to see a very fresh, newish squad. 1 or 2 from the World Cup perhaps will be involved. But then they have 5 T20s. There's only 9 T20s now until the World Cup in America and the West Indies. So there's 5 in the West Indies, 1 in Barbados, 2 in Grenada, 2 in Trinidad, and then 4 against Pakistan in mid-May, late-ish May. So I expect to see a mixture of new guys. I think some of the older, tired or injured chaps who have been on the ODI will miss out. I think they won't be picked. And it will be an interesting selection meeting, because which way do they go? Do they go with freshly peeled new players and a few of the younger ODI players, or will there be pressure? Because Rob Keys announced these 29 contracts. That's an awkward selection meeting.
Yeah.
You know, are they going to pick the tried and tested, sadly who have failed, but to play T20? You know, some of our players picked for the ODIs are probably more successful T20 players than ODI players. Will we go that route, or will we pick a new set of players for the T20? I think we'll pick new players, fresh players for the ODIs. But for the T20, I think it'll be a mixture of a few with contracts and a few new ones. I can't see, obviously, Stokes isn't going to go. I mean, he's been half fit. Is Bairstow fit?
Yeah.
You know, or do you rest Mark Wood? Gus Atkinson's hopefully fit. He would go.
Yeah.
Maybe the likes of Crawley, Duckett. I don't know. Hayne. We've just got to be a little bit honest here now. The problem is, if you pick some of these older, out of form players, the difficulty is you're picking them probably because they've got a 2-year, 3-year contract.
Yeah, that's right. Just seemed very strange to me, the timing of these contracts. I mean, it was, I don't know, to my point of view, it should have been done after the World Cup was over, and there would have been a time to sort of sit down and work out who was worth what. But
funny enough, so do I. But there seems to be, I don't know if the word is spooked, but nonetheless, the ECB, Rob Key, has announced these. And the question is, does he stick by them? And all will be revealed, I think, mid-November.
Put your mouth where your money is. Now, go on.
Go on. And then you've got the Indian Test Series. You know, everyone's giving Mott stick at this moment. I'm concerned that we're going to struggle. Yeah. Bazball, you know, apparently it's in the dictionary now.
It is.
Bazball is. I'd probably put a heavy wager that Bazball doesn't do its stuff in India after Christmas.
No. No, it won't. Now, before I let you go, I was at a very nice evening last week, and the one of the new things that John Stevenson has started at Essex are members' suppers, which are a gathering of the great and the good from amongst the membership to come and meet the CEO and various august people from the boardroom and management of Essex. And the guest speaker was an old mate of yours, Mr. J.K. Lever. And in the Q&A, he spoke really glowing. It wasn't provoked, or no one asked him about it, but he was just talking generally about left arms bowlers that he likes in the past and in the present. And the name Reece Topley came up, and he said that he loves watching Reece, and he really hopes that if he can stay injury-free and his luck changes, because it's not all down to his poor body. I mean, he's had some awful luck stepping on Toblerones, and even the incident against Sri Lanka just recently. That's a regular fielding manoeuvre. But anyway, JK said that he could see Reece going on to achieve really, really great things. And he has had a really good World Cup. In fact, this last few months when he's been back in an England shirt, he has delivered the goods.
He did, and I was extremely proud to be there. Going back to Reece's Essex days, and that's really very nice of JK to say that. And he knows his onions. He really does. Not just bowling, but left armers and things like that. Reece's ceiling has always been high. You often come across cricketers and you look at this fella and he's got potential, but where's his ceiling? Where's the highest he can go? And not because he's my son, but as a cricket coach and a cricketer, I have rated Reece particularly high. And I know in the last few years, it's probably for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, his ceiling has been high. And I know he's capable of being one of the world's best bowlers. He has height, he has enough pace, and he swings it, and he swings it late. And he has a great seam presentation as well. And importantly, he's got a big heart. So listen, I hope he stays fit. I hope his career isn't defined in years to come by plenty of injuries. He's gone through the mill with 5 stress fractures. He's got a 44 millimeter pin through L4. Mentally, that's a big thing to overcome over the years, as with the stress fractures. But he's just got this little broken finger. It's the finger in which he holds onto the ball, and right at the end, it's sort of shattered. Hopefully, he'll be available. Hopefully, he'll be picked, and hopefully, he will get enough overs under his belt to maybe perform in the West Indies. But yeah, thanks to JK. Thank you for mentioning that. We're very proud of him. And he's still quite, he's 29. He hasn't got the overs bowled in him that a normal 29-year-old. So if he wants to, he has the opportunity and perhaps the desire to play a little bit longer, because he hasn't bowled the overs. So good luck to him if he wants to.
We're all rooting for him. We always have done. He's a credit to you and Julia, and just an example to any youngsters out there that, encounter setbacks. Just look at the career of Reece Topley, who can basically redefine setbacks, but still comes, to quote Ian Dowie's phrase, bounce back ability, which was something else that made it into the Oxford English Dictionary. That's Reece.
I love that word. I use that word often. With Reece, we often use going back to the bank of bounce back ability. Absolutely right. Bowlers, batsmen, they're happy if they're scoring runs and they get the occasional naught and maybe a bad dismissal. But bowlers, you often bowl without reward. You can bowl well without any reward. But with injuries, there's always an injury around the corner. And I often look at young bowlers, young cricketers, and if you haven't got a huge heart, And if you're not prepared to keep coming back again and again and again, then you won't make it. Unfortunately, that's part of the DNA. You need that bounce back ability. Massive.
Well, we look forward to seeing Reece back in an England shirt, hopefully in the Caribbean, if not very soon after. Don, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate your unwavering support of 98 Not Out. Always excellent
Pleasure.
content, always very, very interesting and great to talk to you. So I shall let you head back into the sunlit uplands of South Suffolk, where you can put your Ray-Bans on, put the shorts on, and sit in the garden with a cold beer.
Well, it's rather wet, but I like the idea, and I bid you a good night. And thank you very much, Darren.
Don Topley, many, many thanks, and we'll catch up soon.